There is a silent strength that lies in the way you treat yourself. It is not loud, it is not forceful, and it is not something that demands recognition from others. It is a steady current that moves beneath the surface, shaping how you think, how you act, and how you allow others to treat you. This current is called self-respect. To respect yourself is to acknowledge your own worth without needing constant validation from the outside world. It is to walk through life with a spine upright, not because you wish to be seen as proud, but because you understand the dignity of being human. Self-respect is not arrogance, nor is it self-obsession. It is a balance between humility and honor. A person who respects themselves does not compare endlessly with others because their sense of value is rooted deep within. They do not allow every passing opinion to shake them because they know who they are when the noise of the world fades. Without self-respect, life becomes an endless cycle of trying to please, trying to prove, and trying to be accepted. With self-respect, life shifts into a path of clarity, where choices are not made out of fear of rejection, but out of alignment with one's own principles. One of the most powerful effects of self-respect is the boundaries it creates. When you respect yourself, you stop tolerating situations, relationships, or environments that dishonor your spirit. You no longer cling to what drains you, simply because you believe that you deserve more than to be diminished. Boundaries are not walls. They are gates that determine what is allowed to enter your life and what must remain outside. A person who lacks self-respect will struggle to say no, will hesitate to step away, and will sacrifice their own peace in order to maintain connections. But a person who cultivates self-respect learns the art of protecting their inner world because they recognize its value. Self-respect also changes the way you pursue growth. When you see yourself as worthy, you do not settle for the bare minimum, nor do you allow yourself to remain in a cycle of neglect. You nourish your body because you see it as sacred. You educate your mind because you believe it deserves to expand. You cultivate your character because you understand that your presence leaves an impact. Growth born out of self-respect is sustainable because it is not fueled by competition or insecurity, but by the recognition that becoming the best version of yourself is the greatest honor you can give to your own existence. There is also a quiet resilience that comes with self-respect. Life will always bring challenges, moments of failure, and times of loss. Without self-respect, these moments can completely shatter a person, leaving them dependent on others to rebuild their sense of worth. But when self-respect is deeply rooted, setbacks are endured with dignity. Even in the midst of difficulty, a person who respects themselves does not collapse into despair because their value is not dependent on external success. They can stand in the storm without losing the ground beneath their feet because their worth is not negotiable. Self-respect is also the foundation of how you interact with others. The way you carry yourself sets the tone for how others treat you. When you hold yourself with dignity, you send an unspoken message that you expect the same. People can sense whether you value yourself, and they respond accordingly. It is not about demanding respect through force. It is about embodying it so clearly that it becomes undeniable. A person who disrespects themselves often attracts relationships that mirror that lack of value, while a person who honors themselves invites connections rooted in mutual recognition. But to cultivate self-respect requires honesty. It requires looking at yourself without illusions, acknowledging both strengths and flaws, and choosing to stand by yourself regardless. Many people confuse self-respect with perfection, but it is not about being flawless. It is about knowing your imperfections and still choosing not to belittle yourself. It is about refusing to speak words to yourself that you would never speak to someone you love. It is about treating yourself with the same compassion and discipline that you would wish for your closest friend. Discipline is another dimension of self-respect. To respect yourself means to hold yourself accountable, not in a way that is harsh, but in a way that is firm. It means not indulging in behaviors that weaken your mind or destroy your body because you know you deserve better than to live beneath your potential. It means following through with commitments to yourself, not breaking promises simply because no one else will know. True self-respect is built not in the eyes of others, but in the quiet moments when only you are watching. It is in those moments that you decide whether you are living in alignment with your own values or betraying them. The power of self-respect also lies in its ability to free you from dependence. When you know your worth, you no longer cling desperately to people, achievements, or possessions to define you. You can appreciate them, you can enjoy them, but you are not enslaved by them. This freedom allows you to move through life without fear of loss, because nothing external can strip you of the dignity that is rooted within. Self-respect is a kind of inner wealth that cannot be stolen. To live with self-respect is to live with clarity, strength, and balance. It is to walk a path where you no longer trade your peace for approval, where you no longer shrink yourself to fit the expectations of others, and where you no longer allow disrespect to define the space you inhabit. It is a power that does not shout, but it radiates in silence. It shapes the way you rise in the morning, the way you move through challenges, and the way you carry yourself in the presence of the world. Value is often measured by external standards, wealth, possessions, achievements, or recognition. The world trains the mind to constantly compare, to weigh oneself against others, to seek validation from outside sources that are never truly stable. But there exists a deeper law, one that cannot be altered by circumstance, loss, or the fleeting opinions of others. This is the law of inner value. It is not about what one collects, but about what one cultivates within. When the mind clings to the illusion that value is determined by material accumulation, it lives in perpetual scarcity. There is always someone richer, more successful, more admired. The competition never ends and the satisfaction never arrives. Inner value is of a different quality altogether. It is not built on comparison, it is built on recognition. Recognition of one's inner strength, clarity, and wisdom. Recognition that what you are at the deepest level cannot be diminished by any external fluctuation. The law of inner value begins with presence. When you are fully present, you begin to notice the richness of simple existence. Breathing, moving, seeing, feeling, life is not poor, it is abundant. But the distracted mind, always pulled toward future gains or past regrets, fails to notice the treasure that already surrounds it. Presence is not passive. It sharpens awareness, it strengthens attention. In this state, value is not something you search for, it is something you embody. Another principle within this law is integrity. The world can give you titles and take them away, but it cannot take away the truth of your actions. To live with integrity is to align thought, word, and deed. When this alignment is cultivated, a person becomes unshakable. Others may misunderstand or reject, but the inner compass remains steady. Integrity is silent value. It requires no advertisement, no approval, no applause. It is the quiet power that commands respect even when no one is watching. Inner value also grows through discipline. Discipline is the practice of choosing long-term clarity over short-term comfort. In a culture of instant gratification, discipline is often misunderstood as restriction. But true discipline is liberation. It frees you from the tyranny of impulses and allows you to invest energy into what truly matters. Through discipline, the mind becomes stronger, the body steadier, and the spirit clearer. This inner strength cannot be bought, cannot be handed down, cannot be borrowed. It must be cultivated, and once it is, it belongs to you fully. Equally important is compassion. The law of inner value does not exist in isolation. Value expands when shared. To live with compassion is not to weaken oneself. It is to allow the heart to grow beyond the boundaries of ego. Compassion reveals that value is not in taking, but in giving. Not in hoarding, but in flowing. The one who carries compassion becomes a source of light, and this light creates value that no measurement of the material world can contain. There is also resilience. Inner value shines most clearly in the moments of difficulty. When storms come, external securities collapse quickly. Wealth can vanish, reputations can shatter, relationships can shift. But resilience, rooted in inner value, transforms adversity into growth. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to see the depth of your own strength. Without inner value, challenges crush the spirit. With it, challenges refine the spirit. Silence is another expression of this law. In silence, one discovers that value is not always in what is expressed, but in what is withheld. Silence teaches patience, teaches listening, teaches depth. The noisy mind seeks to assert itself constantly, but the silent mind listens to life itself. From silence emerges clarity, and from clarity emerges wisdom. Wisdom, unlike knowledge, cannot be measured in degrees or certificates. It is the essence of inner value, and it radiates in presence more than in words. The law of inner value is not taught by society because it cannot be sold. It is not profitable to encourage people to look inward and realize that their worth is not dependent on external approval. Markets thrive on dissatisfaction, on convincing individuals that they are incomplete and need something more to become whole. But once you understand this law, the spell is broken. You no longer chase value outside, you cultivate it within. You no longer measure yourself against others, you measure yourself against the potential within you. This law also reminds us of impermanence. External value can always be taken away, but inner value is untouchable. Wealth can disappear, but wisdom remains. Titles can be stripped, but integrity endures. Recognition can fade, but presence never abandons you. Inner value is the only treasure that follows you beyond all changes, beyond all losses, beyond even the body itself. Every day becomes a chance to honor this law. Every choice is a chance to invest in what is permanent over what is temporary. Every moment of presence, every act of discipline, every breath of compassion, every return to silence adds to the wealth that cannot be stolen. The law of inner value is universal, and once you begin to live by it, you realize that what you were seeking outside was never missing inside, was in life. We often confuse the subtle yet powerful difference between a boundary and a barrier. Both appear to function as lines of separation. Both appear to keep something out or protect what is within. But their essence is not the same, and when we begin to mistake one for the other, the flow of life is disrupted. Boundaries are rooted in clarity, understanding, and respect. Barriers, on the other hand, are born from fear, avoidance, and resistance. The difference lies not in their outward appearance, but in the inner state from which they are created. A boundary is not a wall. It is a conscious declaration of where your energy begins and where it ends. It is a marker that communicates, this is what supports me, this is what I can offer, and this is what I will not allow to diminish me. Boundaries are living, flexible, and clear. They are shaped by awareness and can adapt as your understanding of yourself and the world deepens. To set a boundary is to recognize your own value and to create space for growth, both for yourself and for others. Boundaries allow relationships, work, and inner balance to remain healthy. A barrier, however, arises when the mind seeks to protect itself through disconnection. It is a rigid structure, often unconscious, that blocks life from reaching you. Where boundaries allow communication, barriers silence it. Where boundaries invite respect, barriers demand distance. A barrier is not created from clarity but from pain, from mistrust, from a refusal to be touched by the unpredictability of existence. While a boundary allows energy to flow in balanced exchange, a barrier interrupts the current and isolates the one who builds it. When you look closely, boundaries expand freedom, while barriers shrink it. Imagine a river guided by its banks. The boundary of the riverbank does not stop the water, it gives direction, form, and momentum. But if you build a dam across the stream, water collects and stagnates. It loses movement, freshness, and vitality. In the same way, when you set a healthy boundary, life continues to flow. But when you construct a barrier, you may feel safe for a moment, yet over time the energy becomes stagnant, heavy, and suffocating. It is important to notice how often barriers disguise themselves as boundaries. We may say we are protecting our peace, when in truth we are avoiding difficult conversations. We may claim to be choosing ourselves while secretly building walls out of resentment. We may convince ourselves that silence is wisdom, when in reality silence is being used to escape the discomfort of expression. The mind is clever in this way, and unless there is deep reflection, barriers appear noble while quietly draining life of openness. The art, then, is not simply in setting lines, but in recognizing the source from which those lines emerge. A boundary requires courage. It requires the strength to be honest about what serves your well-being and what does not. It is not always easy to state clearly what you need, what you allow, and what you refuse. Yet it is an act of integrity, for without it, confusion spreads. A boundary requires trust in yourself and trust in others to respect what is spoken. It opens the possibility of authentic connection because it creates clarity. A barrier, in contrast, does not require courage. It requires retreat. It requires the closing of the door before anyone has the chance to knock. It prevents confrontation, not by resolving conflict, but by denying it access. It protects not by strength, but by withdrawal. And in this, barriers become prisons built by one's own hand. The world may be kept at a distance, but so too is growth, intimacy, and transformation. Observe the body when a boundary is set. There is a calm firmness, an energy that feels stable yet open. The heart remains soft while the voice is steady. There is no hostility, only clarity. But observe the body when a barrier is present. Shoulders tense, the chest tightens, the gaze withdraws. The heart closes, the voice may become sharp or silent, and the energy contracts. The difference is not in the words spoken, but in the energy carried. Boundaries invite responsibility. When you set them, you take ownership of your space. You claim your energy and create balance within your environment. Barriers deny responsibility. They place blame outside and declare, I am this way because of them. In truth, the barrier is a refusal to engage with responsibility, and so it limits one's growth. Boundaries empower, barriers weaken. When boundaries are honored, respect naturally arises. Others understand the shape of your presence, and they know where they can meet you. It is like a dance where both partners understand the rhythm, the pace, the space between. When barriers are built, connection is broken. The dance is no longer possible, for one partner has already stepped away from the floor. To live with boundaries is to remain in the flow of life with awareness. To live with barriers is to resist life, to attempt to stop its unpredictable current. The first nourishes vitality, the second exhausts it. The first deepens relationships, the second dissolves them. The first strengthens inner peace, the second creates inner loneliness. When you reflect on your own life, ask yourself, are the lines you have drawn based on awareness or fear? Do they protect without isolating, or do they isolate under the disguise of protection? Do they invite growth, or do they prevent it? The answers to these questions reveal whether what stands before you is a boundary or a barrier. Restraint is often misunderstood. To many, it feels like limitation, as if something essential is being denied. Yet in the ancient traditions, restraint is not about suppression, but about the wise use of energy. When one learns restraint, one learns to hold back not out of fear, but out of mastery. A person who can act, but chooses not to, is far more powerful than one who acts without control. The energy that is not wasted in impulsive reactions becomes stored, condensed, and refined into something greater. Consider the difference between a river and a flood. The river, though restrained by its banks, moves with direction, power, and clarity. The flood, uncontrolled and uncontained, destroys everything in its path and eventually loses its force. Restraint is the riverbank of our energy. It provides form and discipline so that energy can flow with intensity and purpose instead of scattering aimlessly. In daily life, the energy of restraint appears in small choices. It shows itself in the moment when you want to respond with anger, but instead you breathe and observe. It shows itself when desire rises and urges you to chase without thought, but you hold and let the impulse pass. It shows itself when words burn on the tongue, but silence is chosen instead. In each act of restraint, the mind strengthens. The energy that would have escaped as reaction remains within, deepening presence and sharpening awareness. True restraint does not mean repression. To repress is to bury energy, to lock it away in hidden chambers of the mind and body. What is repressed will eventually leak out in distorted ways, creating suffering and imbalance. Restraint is not the denial of energy, but its transformation. It is like a bowstring drawn back. The energy is not lost, it is stored, concentrated, waiting to be released with accuracy and force. In martial discipline, restraint is the foundation. A strike delivered with restraint is far more effective than one born of wild force. The master does not expend energy with every movement. Instead, every gesture is deliberate, every action economical. The untrained person spends their energy recklessly, exhausting themselves quickly. The trained one conserves energy, releasing it only when necessary, and therefore carries endurance, precision, and strength far beyond the ordinary. The same applies to the mind. When the mind is restless, jumping from thought to thought, there is no restraint. Energy is scattered in endless chatter. But when the mind is disciplined, thoughts are restrained, attention is gathered. Suddenly, the mind becomes sharp like a blade. It cuts through illusion and distraction. It sees clearly. Such is the power of mental restraint. It transforms the ordinary mind into a tool of focus and insight. In silence, one can observe the energy of restraint most clearly. To sit without moving, without speaking, without reacting, is to confront the raw force of impulses. The body itches to adjust, the mind seeks entertainment, the emotions stir and demand expression, yet if one holds, if one remains unmoved, all of this restless energy begins to transform. What once was agitation slowly becomes calm strength. The waves that once disturbed the surface of the lake begin to settle, and in stillness the depth of the water is revealed. Restraint also teaches humility. The ego constantly seeks to prove itself, to show, to dominate, to be heard. But restraint whispers, not now. By holding back, the ego is denied its usual food. Space opens, and in that space, wisdom grows. One learns that not every battle needs to be fought, not every opinion needs to be voiced, not every desire needs to be satisfied. Restraint becomes the teacher of patience, and patience becomes the teacher of strength. There is a hidden joy in restraint. It is not the joy of indulgence, but the joy of knowing that you are free from the chains of compulsion. To indulge is easy. The world constantly tempts with pleasures, distractions, and instant gratifications. To restrain is to step outside of this cycle and recognize that you are not a slave to desire. That recognition itself is liberation. It is the quiet satisfaction of being in control of one's own inner kingdom, rather than being pulled endlessly by the strings of external influences. Energy is finite in every moment. Where it flows determines what becomes of your life. Restraint ensures that energy is not wasted on trivialities. Imagine saving the drops of water instead of letting them fall unused. Eventually, you will have a reservoir. Likewise, every small act of restraint gathers into a reservoir of strength, clarity, and willpower. And from this reservoir, great things can emerge. Without restraint, power is chaos. With restraint, power becomes directed. A flame without a lamp burns everything around it. A flame contained within a lamp lights the path. The energy of restraint turns the fire of impulses into the light of awareness. It is not about making life smaller, but about channeling energy into higher expression. When practiced deeply, restraint does not feel like holding back, but like expansion. Because one is no longer reacting to everything, energy becomes available for deeper living. One can listen more fully, act more consciously, and perceive more subtly. Restraint creates the space where growth happens, where transformation takes root, where true mastery of self begins. Love is often misunderstood as possession, as control, as something that must be tightly held in order to be secure. Yet the more one tries to hold it, the more fragile it becomes, slipping through the fingers like sand. True love does not demand a cage. It does not thrive under the weight of expectation, nor does it flourish when suffocated by fear. Real love breathes in freedom. And it is this freedom that gives love its strength, its beauty, and its endurance. To understand love rooted in freedom is to understand that love is not about ownership, but about alignment, trust, and the capacity to allow another to grow without chains. When love is rooted in freedom, it is no longer born out of insecurity or need. It is not a response to emptiness, but a celebration of wholeness. Love in this form does not arise because one lacks something and seeks another to complete them. Instead, it grows from the overflow of inner balance. When two beings come together from a place of freedom, they meet not as captors and prisoners, not as takers and providers, but as equals who have discovered strength within themselves. They share without demanding, give without keeping score, and support without seeking control. The kind of love that is rooted in freedom requires a different foundation. It demands that one first recognize themselves as complete. If an individual sees themselves as incomplete, they will cling to another to fill the gaps, and in doing so, they will attempt to bind the other person to their expectations. This is how relationships become chains, and chains, no matter how adorned, are still chains. Love loses its essence when it is forced into a prison of control. But when freedom becomes the soil, love grows like a tree whose roots are deep and unshakable, and whose branches reach outward without limit. Freedom in love is not the absence of commitment. It is not a careless disregard for bonds, nor is it a dismissal of responsibility. On the contrary, it is a higher form of responsibility. It is the responsibility of nurturing without dominating, of guiding without imposing, of caring without suffocating. Freedom in love means that both hearts remain unbound, yet both remain devoted. It means that the bond is chosen, not forced, and the choice is renewed each day not out of fear, but out of joy. Love rooted in freedom also changes the way one perceives loss. When love is possessive, the thought of losing the other brings panic, jealousy, and desperation. The mind clings tightly, creating suffering in the process. But when love is free, there is no such fear, for one knows that love is not about owning the other, but about witnessing their unfolding. The joy is not in binding them to one's will, but in seeing them flourish in their own way. To love in freedom is to understand that the presence of the other is a gift, not a possession, and gifts are not meant to be chained, but cherished. This perspective also transforms the inner state of the one who loves. Possessive love drains energy, for it is rooted in fear and constant effort to control. Free love, on the other hand, replenishes energy because it flows naturally and harmoniously. It creates space for both to breathe, for both to expand, and for both to evolve. Where there is freedom, there is trust, and where there is trust, there is no need to monitor, to confine, or to dictate. Freedom becomes the silent proof of love's authenticity, for if one truly loves, they do not need to imprison what they love. At the same time, love rooted in freedom requires courage. It is not the path of the insecure nor of the controlling, for it asks one to surrender their fear of uncertainty. To love freely is to accept that the other may walk away, may change, may grow in directions unknown. But this acceptance is what makes love real. To let someone choose to stay, without compulsion, is a greater form of connection than to bind them against their will. Courage is needed to allow love to be what it naturally is, without reshaping it into a form that pleases one's ego. Love rooted in freedom also reveals the relationship between love and individuality. Many think that to love is to lose oneself in the other, to merge until nothing remains of the self. But in truth, love becomes deeper when both retain their individuality. Freedom protects individuality, and individuality makes love richer, for two distinct beings bring their own unique energies into the bond. In the meeting of two wholes, love becomes abundance. In the meeting of two halves, love becomes dependency. Wholeness is the seed, freedom is the soil, and love is the blossoming tree. It is important to recognize that freedom in love is not always easy because human attachment runs deep. The mind wants to control, to define, to secure outcomes, but love cannot be forced into certainty. Love in its truest form is like water. It flows, it adapts, it nourishes, but it cannot be held tightly. The attempt to control only disrupts its flow. Love rooted in freedom allows the water to move naturally, and in this flow it finds its greatest strength. When love is free, it also heals. It heals the wounds caused by rejection, by fear, by past failures, because it is not trying to prove anything. It is not trying to live up to an image. It is not trying to conquer or to own. It simply exists in its purest form as an offering, as a presence, as a state of being. And because it is free, it does not fade when challenged, for it is not tied to conditions. Conditions may change, circumstances may shift, but freedom allows love to remain untarnished because it is not bound by external demands. Love rooted in freedom is the highest form of love because it arises not from need but from abundance, not from fear but from trust, not from chains but from wings. It allows one to love without holding back, to give without losing oneself, and to receive without guilt. It is expansive, it is liberating, and it is the essence of what love is meant to be. There are connections that exist beyond the measure of time, beyond the calendar pages that fall away, beyond the hours that slip through our hands like water. These connections are not formed in haste, nor are they fragile threads that unravel when distance grows. They are bonds that remain steady and present even when silence stretches across days, months, or years. The timeless bond is not built upon the surface of fleeting interactions. It is forged in depth, in truth, in presence that once encountered never fades. When we speak of bonds, often we think of relationships shaped by proximity, by frequent words exchanged, by the daily rituals of companionship. But the timeless bond transcends such measures. It exists whether spoken to or not, whether seen or unseen. Time has no authority over it, because time is merely a framework of the mind, and the bond belongs to something deeper than the mind. It belongs to the realm of essence, where what matters is not frequency, but sincerity, not quantity, but quality of presence. Consider how two individuals can meet for only a short while, yet leave impressions that last an entire lifetime. Consider how someone can depart from our lives physically, yet their influence, their energy, their imprint remains woven into the fabric of who we are. The timeless bond is not dependent on continuation in the ordinary sense. It thrives in the memory of the heart, in the recognition of spirit, in the alignment of energies that once converged. This kind of bond teaches us that attachment is not the same as connection. Attachment demands possession, continuity, and constant reassurance. Connection requires none of this. Connection flows, it moves freely, and because it is free, it endures. The timeless bond is strengthened not by clinging, but by letting it exist without conditions. It does not weaken in silence, it does not dissolve with absence. In truth, it sometimes grows stronger in such spaces because it is tested against time and it proves unshaken. There is wisdom in recognizing that not all ties are meant to stay in visible form. Some are meant to retreat into the unseen, where they continue their existence quietly, like an underground river that nourishes from below. Just because the river is hidden does not mean its waters are absent. The timeless bond works in the same way. It nourishes us even when not visible, even when not acknowledged in words. It shapes the way we perceive the world, the choices we make, the strength we carry within ourselves. It is easy to believe that only what we can see, hear, or touch is real. But the timeless bond teaches us otherwise. It reminds us that reality extends beyond the senses, that the invisible carries as much weight as the visible. We feel its presence in moments of silence, in sudden memories, in the comfort that arises without explanation. We do not have to force it, nor maintain it with effort. The bond sustains itself because it was formed in truth, and truth does not erode. Time often tries to convince us that all things must fade. But the timeless bond exists outside of this illusion. It is not eroded by the years, it is not diminished by distance. Instead, it exists as a constant reminder that what is authentic, what is rooted in essence, cannot be undone. The passing of time may change the form, but not the core. It may shift appearances, but the energy beneath remains untouched. In a world where everything seems temporary, where change is constant, and where endings seem inevitable, the timeless bond is proof of continuity. It stands as an anchor, reminding us that some connections are not subject to impermanence. They are like stars even when clouds cover the sky. Even when daylight hides them from view, they are still there, still burning, still radiating their light. The timeless bond also reveals itself through growth. Just as a tree can grow for decades, even centuries, from roots unseen beneath the soil, the bond grows as we evolve. We may walk different paths, pursue different journeys, but the connection remains. The growth of one is never isolated from the other, because at the root, the bond ensures that the energies remain linked. When one learns, both are enriched. When one suffers, the other feels the echo. This kind of connection is not meant to be controlled, nor can it be severed by simple will. It belongs to a deeper order, something beyond human design. We may attempt to define it, explain it, categorize it, but the more we try, the more elusive it becomes. Its nature is mystery, and in that mystery lies its strength. The timeless bond thrives precisely because it resists confinement. We find peace in knowing that we do not need to hold on tightly for it to endure. We do not need to fear its loss because it cannot be lost. Time may shift, circumstances may change, people may move in and out of our visible lives, but the bond remains. It is a reminder that not all that is real requires constant validation. Some truths exist quietly, without announcement, without performance, and yet they remain unshakable. The timeless bond is not about permanence in form, but permanence in essence. It reminds us that while the body is bound by time, the spirit is not. And when two spirits recognize each other, when they align in truth, that recognition transcends every measure the world tries to place upon it.